Respected coordinator of the course, online refresher course in comparative literature and translation studies, and my dear friends. I am Ramadas Banasode. My roll number is 14. Today I am going to give my seminar on best practices benchmarking approach for quality enhancement in higher education institutes. Now I am sharing my screen. Kindly wait. The topic is best practices benchmarking approach for quality enhancement in higher educational institutes. We all know that NAAC, that is National Assessment and Accreditation Council, is a government organization. It was established in 1994 under the policy, under the recommendation of National Educational Policy in 1986. The prime task of NAAC is to assess and accredit higher education institutes across our country. Uh, so here, National Assessment and Accreditation Council in higher education uh, highly focuses on quality management. It lays a special emphasis on quality, which is a defining element in the development of higher education. The quality is expected to be in major areas such as evaluation, as well as the next important part is promotion, and the next one is sustenance initiatives. Now, in order to bring development at higher education institutes, there are certain initiatives which are recommended by NAAC. It is noteworthy that significant and path-breaking efforts are taking place in higher education institutes to bring about revolutionary quality improvements. Now, best practice at higher education institutes exhibits characteristics of quality thinking adopted by uh, institute. So here, best practice is very important. It is an identity of higher education institutes. NAAC has given more than 100 points regarding best practices, and here these, with the help of these points, higher education institute has to run best practices more than 3 years. Now, what are the important points? What are the important things which can be considered in order to carry out the best practices? Now, it depends on many variables. We need to take consideration the local needs of the institute, which is very useful in order to decide the best practices. NAAC is advocating the best practices benchmarking approach for quality enhancement in higher education. Now, you know that the Professor V.S. Prasad, the former director of NAAC, he says that best practices are those practices. What does best practices mean? Best practices means those practices which add commendable value to an higher education institutes. Now it can be run by various stakeholders of the institutes, and here most important point is that we need to take into consideration the standards of the quality, which is very important while choosing the best practices at higher education. Now, while discussing the major objectives of best practices, now here we need to consider that best practices is an identity of higher education. In order to maintain standard of quality of higher education, best practices are very useful, and best practices helps in development of an institution. These are the some what is the main objective of best practices? Best practice, the objective of main best practice is to develop an institution. Now you know that institution is a source to perform social responsibility as well as national responsibility also. So here we need to focus on some important objectives. For example, these practices lays a special emphasis on continuous improvement efforts. Now this is not just limited to 1 year. Here these practices are limited to not limited, it should run carry out more than 3 years. Then we can get optimistic or positive results. Uh, Professor, the former director of NAAC, Professor Prasad, he explicates and focuses uh, on the capability of higher education in connection with identification, implementation, institutionalization, internalization, and dissemination of best practices. Now, best practice is an approach. We can call this as an benchmarking approach. This is based on inductive approach. You know that. Now, what does inductive approach mean? um, it has a very close connection with the best practices. Now, there are many best practices which can be carried out by HEIs, which can be related to research sector, which also can recognize the needs of the staff, which can focus on the needs of students. What are the responsibilities, local responsibility of the higher education institutes, as well as national responsibility. It means that societal responsibility of the HEI. We also need to take into consideration further many initiatives concerning the holistic development of students, as well as skill enhancement is also very important, which encourages promotes students career. So we can also carry out best practices based on skill enhancement. Further, we can also take the green initiatives that can be carried with the help of NSS and NCC students, and it can be an outreach program also. So green initiatives can be carried out with the help of best practices at higher education institutes. Now, in the you we first important stage is that we should be able to identify the need. आपली जी काही गरज आहे ती गरज आपण लक्षात घेणं खूप गरजेचं आहे. Now here, what kind of need it is? The need that is we need to identify of best practices. Now, how can we identify? We can identify the best practices which depends on many variables, such as we need to take into consideration what is the goal of education institute, what are the pedagogical requirements, what are the global concerns. Then we can also take into consideration local context also, nature of learners, competencies of staffs, infrastructure, facilities, and what are the requirements stated by central and state government. These points can be taken into consideration to focus on the identification of best practices. So the former director, Honorable Professor Prasad, prominently underscores the institutional goals, global or local challenges, the nature of learners and governance requirements. So now, after successful completion of best practices, uh, we should get optimistic results. So, in order to get optimistic results, we should focus on the inductive approach while carrying out the best practices. Now, we need to observe what are the local needs of the HEIs, what are the global needs, and after taking consideration these global concerns, HEIs concerns, the welfare of students, how can we support students in research sector, skill development sector. After having a good observation, we can finalize uh, the best practice. Further, we need to decide a particular pattern in order to carry out these best practices, and we also should be able to uh, focus on tentative hypothesis, tentative results, what we can get after the successful completion of the best practices. And further, we need to start this best practice, and after successful completion of best practices more than 3 years, we can get good results, optimistic results. Therefore, planning is very important. So, inductive approach helps to carry out best practices at higher education institutes. Now, these are the some parameters in order to identify the best practices. We should take into consideration what are the global institutional goals, global or local concerns, challenges. Now, it means that when we identify the best practices, it depends on many variables. Now I have selected here three best practices. Then we can apply what are the important points while defining while carrying out best practices. Now, when after successful completion of best practices, we need to submit some the data related to best practices in typical format, and this typical format consists of the goals of the best practices, what is the context, how it is carried out, what are the evidences of success, and what problems were encountered by higher education institutes during or while carrying out the best practices. Okay, the first best practice I have selected here is my DNA on current happenings. Now, what are the goals of these best practices? The goals of these best practices are to avail platform for students to be expressive. Now, in order to develop personality uh, of students, this best practices is very important. Next one is to increase and foster positive thinking among students. You know that in the age of globalization, the age which is highly affected by virtual reality or technology, positive thinking is very essential, so it can increase and foster positive thinking among students. Next uh, next uh, base goal of this best practice is to remove biased thoughts and mold thinking tank for betterment of nation. Now, what is currently happening at state, national and international level, in order to get acquainted with such current happenings, this best practice is very useful for students. So, this best practice can remove biased thoughts, and it helps to mold thinking tank of students for betterment of nation. Suppose what kind of context it may be, the vast paradigmatic shift in the current global market has brought pressure and responsibilities on HEIs. So, taking into account the changing dimensions of higher education, student is expected to be all rounder. So there is a big burden on higher education institutes to mold the thinking tank of the students, to remove their biased thinking. And why this is? Because for the betterment of nation. So we therefore a student who is very well connected with the current happenings should express and analyze his or her views and opinions, his standpoint, his thinking towards the current happenings. So this is the context. Now, how can we carry out the practice? This can be conducted at the end of each and every week. We can also conduct this at the end of every month also. So a list of first of all, we need to collect or we need to enlist some major topics, major burning areas, major useful uh, topics connected with the state as well as connected with the betterment of state and nation. We can select such kind of topics, and students will be informed and promoted to register their names to share, to join the practice. uh, and we need to promote students to gather at a particular place for the discussion regarding this practice. In this way, we can carry out this practice uh, twice or thrice in a single month and throughout the academic year. Now, after successful um, practice of this initiative, we can get some evidences of success also. For example, the successful implementation of this best practice can enrich the interest of students about the current happenings and the news happenings related to state government, state the initiative, the policies of state government, central government for the betterment of the nation. So also the students, this best practice will promote students to read newspapers. To they can be in touch with the current happenings with the help of magazines, with the help of computer, internet resources, etc. This also can increase and develop the confidence of the students. It can boost the confidence of students. It can help to develop, increase the stage confidence. Also, it can help to make the communication skill of students very impressive. And as well as it can also remove the biased attitudes, thoughts towards a particular thing of the students. So, and last one is the we can also observe the any changes in the attitude of the thinking. It is expected that students will start thinking optimistically or positively. Now, what are the problems encountered by higher education institutes regarding this best practice? The problems that's we know that here the lack of easy, authentic, and studious knowledge resources. Now, generally, students prefer to read on with the help of internet, but it is not sure whether such websites will provide authentic content, authentic news, etc. Okay, so there are many questions regarding the availability of authentic resources, authentic material related to current happenings, current news, about the state and national government or international happenings, etc. So further, next one is insufficient deep and critical knowledge. Now, in order to express views, students should read first. Then he should think about this one, and he should give his critical knowledge about this one. In this way, these are some problems in order to carry out uh, this practice. Next best practice I have selected. This is my personal best practice, but the previous one was also my personal best practice, and it is my fight against local challenges. Now, my fight against local challenges. What are the goals of this best practice? Now, you know that you here while in the decision of selecting best practice or in the stage of selection of the best practice, uh, national accreditation and assessment council, the Bangalore, suggests that higher education institutes should focus on the local needs, local concerns, as well as global concerns. So here students can take into consideration what are the local challenges, and this practice is based on these local challenges. We have to remove these local challenges, local problems, and therefore it is entitled as my fight against local challenges. The first important goal is to make the NSS student able and compete by developing social instead of transformation. Now, the college students, especially NSS and NCC, they uh, they can compete by developing social interest of transformation. Now you know that students should have affinity with the society. Social transformation is very important. Optimistic changes in the society are very important. From that perspective, this best practice is selected. Next goal is to, to promote students to know and understand various local challenges. Now, students will very well get acquainted with what are the local challenges and to minimize the barriers between curricular and its application of social change or social change. Now, what are included in the syllabi? In the what is prescribed for uh, students by university board of studies, that is related to society, that is related to the needs of society, needs of nation or state. So in order to minimize the barriers, to bridge the gap or the divide between these the syllabi and its application at grassroots level, these are some important goals. Now we can carry out this best practice in the context of society, in the context of urban and rural life. That is how can we bridge the gap between urban and rural, urban amenities and rural amenities. Knowing that urban amenities should be provided, should be available at rural areas also. So if the government has some limitations in the provision of urban amenities in rural sector, there is the need to take some innovative steps in order to overcome these problems, especially in the border villages or in the drought prone areas, or with the areas which is highly affected by disasters, natural calamities, etc. So this can be local challenges, and this is the context of this best practice. So how can we carry out this practice? Here we need to focus on NSS students, NCC students, and other students also. These students can be given knowledge throughout the organization of guest lectures, workshops, seminars, conferences by veteran persons, government, departmental authorities, or local NGOs who are very well acquainted with the local challenges. Okay, and further, under the guidance of the college teachers, various groups of NSS students, NC students, or other college students, they will visit the local problems, local challenges, and they will try to overcome these local challenges. So these are some ways to carry out these practices. Now, after successful practice for more than 3 years, we can get some optimistic evidences of success. For example, there is an awareness about the use of water. There is also awareness about the what are the local challenges and what are the problems to overcome these local challenges. Now they are also suppose in my area where college is located, it is highly drought prone area. So in order to overcome this drought uh, prone area, students should you become aware about the use of the water very carefully. Now the students should guide the local farmers also about the changing nature, etc. Now there should be also the considerable growth regarding the water storage also. And the students should promote and you also inspire the local people to make the use of eco-friendly initiatives regarding the use of water. There is the recycle of water is also very important. So after at the end we can expect the feeling of social mobilization among college students. It means that students will learn that they have certain social responsibility, which can be felt in their mobilization, their activities, their initiatives towards the society. Now, what are the problems that that can be encountered or faced or confronted by higher education institutes? For example, it is very challenging to convince each and every farmer or local people uh, which are related to farming sector. Then you know that there can be a shortage of expert trainers. There is also problems, for example, economical problem, etc. And another one is the connectivity with the reaching at remote and isolated villages. It is also very challenging one also. In this way, we also can carry out the next practice learning by doing also. It is highly student oriented practices. One of the student oriented practices. It has also certain goals, context, practice, evid- evidences of success, and what are the problems. So here it is very important that best practice is I can conclude now. Best practice is an identity of higher education institutes initiatives. Best practice should focus on while identifying the best practice, higher education institute should take into consideration what are the local needs, what are the global concerns, what are the needs policies adopted by government in order to strengthen uh, country's power. It can be economic power, political power, etc. These are some paradigms, parameters in identification of best practices. So apart from the above discussion, there are some other best practices such as wildlife conservation, protect and protection, early caring for senior citizen, or love for old age homes, which can widen the contribution of higher education institutes to nation building. In this way, as per the revised accreditation frameworks, the scope for best practice is also rapidly widening with innovative demands. Uh, I am very thankful uh, to the coordinator of this online refresher course run by Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Marathwada University, under UGC Malve Mission Teacher Training Center, Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, Maharashtra. Thank you very much.